Sunday, April 26th, 2020. So we are going to come to shul, back to shul soon. I don't know exactly when, the right time. But a question I wanted to address with you now is, when we do come back, whenever it is, what will the Torah reading be that day? We missed the Parsha of Kisisa in March, middle of March. That's the middle of Book of Shemos, and we have not had a Torah reading since then. So let's just say, just to give an example. I mean, I hope it's sooner, but let's just give an example. Let's say that that we are able to resume services in shul. Let's say for the Parsha of Dvarim, for the beginning of Dvarim. I mean, I hope it's sooner. It might be later, but just to give an example. So on that first Shabbos that we come back, how do we make up all of the Torah readings that we have missed since Parshas Kisisa? And in fact, in Jewish law, there is a proviso for making up a Torah reading that was missed the week before. So how do we do that? So Rav Hershel Schachter has written that what you do is as follows. The procedure is very straightforward. What you do is as follows. On that Shabbos, you take 2 Torah scrolls. On the first Torah, for the first Torah, you read that week's Parsha. I'm just using an example. Let's say it's the Parsha of Devarim. And then for the Maftir, instead of rereading the last 3 or 4 psukim, which is what we normally do on a regular Shabbos, we have a second Sefer Torah. That is, we took out 2 Sefer Torah to begin with. And from the second Sefer Torah, we call up the Maftir Aliyah and we read through straight. So that would be straight without stopping from Parshas Kisisa until the end of Vayikra, end of Bamidbar in this example. And that is the Maftir Aliyah, a little bit of a lengthy Maftir Aliyah. And the Haftorah then would be the Haftorah for the last makeup portion that we read. So if we read the whole thing, and it would be the Haftorah for the Parsha of Masai. Matos Masai is the end of Bamidbar. It would be the Haftorah for Masai, because we always read the Haftorah of whatever was in the second Sefer Torah. When we have 2 Torah scrolls, the Haftorah is connected to what was in the second Sefer. And if that's too lengthy, you could divide it up among a couple of weeks. Let's say each week for 3 or 4 weeks, you would have a Maftir with, let's say, 3 or 4 portions with the Haftorah of whatever was the latest makeup Parsha that you did. And you could continue that for 3 or 4 weeks, so it's not too onerous all at one time. That's one approach. That opinion, by the way, Rav Schachter explains, and is clear within Halacha, that is a minority opinion. And that is not a mainstream halachic opinion. The mainstream halachic opinion is there is no obligation to make up any Torah portions at all. For the following reason. The obligation to read from the Torah is not an obligation on each individual, like I am required to put on tefillin, or I am required to say my own private Shemona Esrei. That's a personal obligation. Reading the Torah is only an obligation on a tzibur, only when there is already a minyan formed. Let's say on Shabbos morning there is a minyan that daven shachris together. Now that minyan has an obligation to do the Torah reading. If there is a minyan going on in shul, and for whatever reason I didn't attend shul that morning, or even if, let's say I'm in shul on a regular Shabbos, and there is a minyan, and the Torah reading is going on, but something happened and I went out for the whole Torah reading, a long Kiddush club. We don't say that I have to then hear 2 Torah portions on the next Shabbos, because that was my own personal lack of hearing the Torah reading that is not subject to being made up. It's only when the tzibur has it. For example, let's say you have a congregation and they're davening, and all of a sudden, before the Torah reading, they realize they don't have a Torah. Whatever reason, they don't have a Torah. So there, the halacha says that that congregation, when they meet the next Shabbos, should read the correct Shabbos plus the one that they missed. Or let's say something else happened in shul and it was disrupted and they didn't have the Torah reading for whatever reason. So there's a provision, since the tzibur was obligated, that tzibur can make it up. But any individual, when I'm home, yesterday I was home in shul, in my house, I did not have any obligation for Torah reading, because that obligation for Torah reading only devolves when there is already a tzibur that is formed. And I have a colleague whose name is Rabbi Gil Student, and he wrote, I applaud any shul that out of love for reading the Torah wants to make up all the missed Torah readings when the shul once again reconvenes, hopefully soon. I just ask you tell me in advance so I can make plans to daven elsewhere. I agree with that, not because of the length that it would take. If the halacha would be that that's what was required, we would do. But I think that is making up the Torah readings is not the correct halacha and not the correct understanding of how the Torah readings work. So we will not. I'm not planning that we're going to do that. However, there are two important consequences of this that could be very, very helpful. One is as follows. Let's say you had a Bar Mitzvah boy who practiced for his Parsha and practiced his Haftora and was ready for his Bar Mitzvah, and then due to coronavirus, he was not able to do it. And we all know, it could be in our own families or people that we know, certainly people at the shul. And okay, it's been very upsetting, very difficult. But according to this, what it would be absolutely possible to do, and it would be perfectly acceptable, is on that Shabbos that we finally come back to shul, we could have the regular Torah portion, and then the Bar Mitzvah boy could have the Maftir Aliyah, and he could learn his Parsha. He could learn his Parsha, and then he could learn his Haftorah that he studied, because that would be part of making it up. As I said before, you don't have to make up the whole thing at once. You can make up whatever part of it you want to make up. So a Bar Mitzvah boy would be able to do his own Parsha and his own Haftorah at the time that we resume. And we will certainly share this information if there's anyone who wants to do that. That would be perfectly fine. One last related issue, not exactly the same thing, but a related issue. And that is, if a person, God forbid, gets sick, let's say with coronavirus, but it could be any illness, and they recover, there is a mitzvah to say Birchas Gomel, to bench Gomel, to say a bracha of thanksgiving, to thank Hashem for the recovery from the serious illness. So that bracha needs to be recited within a minyan. However, Rav Schachter has explained that bracha can be said over Zoom. And the reason for it is as follows. Where a certain prayer requires a minyan, for example, Kaddish, or public Torah reading, or reader's repetition, that requires 10 adult Jewish males in the same room physically. Zoom does not qualify. The bracha of Hagomel does not in itself require a minyan. It's simply that when a person is giving thanks to Hashem, the ideal way to do it is so that other people know about it, so that it is public, so that a person's individual thanks and gratitude to Hashem is shared with others. That sharing with others can be through Zoom. It doesn't require the standard of being a minyan. It simply requires others being aware of it. And therefore, he says that mitzvah could be done through Zoom. And I am going to publicize also that if anyone has been sick, and Baruch Hashem, they are well, that we would be happy to arrange a public Zoom Gomel benching for any such person, and we will try to do that. One last thing I want to mention, and I've said this before, even though it is true that we do not have the official Torah reading when we are at home, but it is still the right thing to study that week's Torah portion, because the mitzvah of learning the weekly Torah portion, that certainly does apply. So it is certainly the right thing to review, to learn, to look into the commentaries, to discuss the Torah reading, and that's the reason that we provide the information about the Torah reading and the maftir and the Haftorah, so that a person has a chance over Shabbos to be able to review those Torah readings. So I do hope we get back to shul together soon. It may be a while, but whenever it is, at least we'll have the procedures of what we will be doing in the future.